Superman Heroes issue 1 sees young Clark talk to his parents about how school sucks. They ask what happened, but Clark says it's because nobody is like him. They wonder if anyone was hurt, but Clark says no, but he wanted to hurt someone. Jonathan says that he once knew how Clark feels, like there is no one in the world that could understand him, but now that he's older, he knows that everyone feels like that at Clark's age. He knows Clark is in a good situation and can handle it, but Clark doesn't think he can, since he always is doing or saying something wrong. Jonathan says that that happens, and of course Clark will say the wrong thing from time to time, but it's important that he's mindful and careful, and that he never gives up, telling him that if he blew it today, to give it a go the next day and fix it. Clark tries to voice his excuses, but Jonathan tells him not to make it complicated, since the world will do that for him, and all he has to do is ask what the best thing is to do right now, and then just do that. Clark hugs his father as Martha joins the family for a group hug. In the present, Lois tells Clark that she loves him, and if he's changing his mind, then they will deal with it. Clark says that their marriage will now really be out in the open, but Lois doesn't mind, kissing her husband and telling him that considering parts of the world think her and Superman are having an affair, it might be good, and she finds herself really okay with the truth coming out. Clark wants to know what people are saying, but Lois says that she does have something to tell him. She shows him the box that Lex gave to her, and while she was going to deal with this herself, Clark is revealing his identity. This needs to be dealt with now. Later, Clark flies across the city, knowing that Perry wants him to write a piece about his choices as Superman and a story about the decision to share his truth with the world. As he saves a child from falling off a playground, he knows he shouldn't be writing this story now, wanting to wait a few weeks or even years until he has had some perspective on things. Knowing he needs some perspective, he calls in all of the Justice Leagues together at the Hall of Justice. He talks with many of the heroes, wondering what their thoughts on this are, with many of them happy for Clark and ready to back him. At Machu Picchu, Booster Gold realizes that it's after the time that Clark revealed who he is, so he can finally scream out the name Clark Kent. Clark suddenly arrives, thinking that something is wrong, but Michael says that it was so hard for him since there were so many times that he has almost let slip that Superman and Clark Kent are one and the same. Clark didn't know if much of his time's history survived into the future, but Michael says that everyone knows that Clark Kent is Superman. Clark thinks that thin oxygen is getting to Michael, so the friends fly off, with Booster telling Superman that what comes next is amazing. At Wayne Manor, Bruce is met by Diana, who asks how he is doing, but the stoic Bruce merely tells her that he is fine, despite Diana knowing he isn't. He doesn't want to talk with her about what Clark has done, heading inside where he offers Diana some tea. After a moment, Bruce says that what Clark is doing is a very bad idea, since it puts everyone he knows and cares for in danger, and he will never be out of the spotlight now, which could compromise the rest of them. Diana knows that Clark is still Superman, arguing that him revealing himself has actually made the loved ones he has safer. She wants to know what this really is about, but Bruce gets up, heading into the Batcave. Diana thinks that Bruce should be happy for Clark and his family, but Bruce says he isn't, since him speaking his truth is just another way for him to say what he wants is more important. He knows it's a way for him to disregard others. Diana knows that that's never been Cal at all, and since when could Bruce ever think of using the words selfish and Superman in the same sentence? Bruce says there is always a first time for everything, and Diana now understands Bruce's anger, since Superman has gone and done the one thing he can never replicate, since everything else Bruce has an answer for, everything he can meet and match, but this is not something he can. Bruce says that he doesn't want to be jealous of the Kents, and most of the time he isn't, but he sometimes wonders what it would be like to have what Clark has, a family with nothing to hide. Diana wonders if perhaps one day that could happen, but Bruce won't hold his breath. At Smallville, Clark visits Mr. McKay, his former science teacher, who he tells it's good to see him again, especially after the recent news. Clark doesn't know why he's really there, but he does want to make sure that McKay knows that in spite of all the times that he wanted to use his powers to cheat on assignments and tests, he never cheated. Clark says that he worked hard for him, as he has for everyone else, be it Ma or Pa or Perry White at the planet, and it's all thanks to Mr. McKay, and he guesses he just wanted him to know that, since if he were to track his life from boy to man, it would go right through McKay's classroom. McKay knows that Clark learned much in his classroom, and he knows Clark would never cheat his way up to a C- grade, since cheaters are usually grandiose in their cheating, so he knows that Clark earned his grade, and he knew it since every time he got knocked down by him or someone else, else at the school, he always got back up and would do better. He reveals everyone was talking and sharing stories about Clark, and all McKay could think was that of course he was Superman. It made sense since Clark Kent was the kid who always got back up. Clark thanks his teacher, who says that he's welcome back anytime. McKay goes to ask Clark if he remembers what determines a covalent and ionic bond between two atoms, but Clark has already left. Later, Clark and Lois survey mountainous piles of fan mail and letters that they have received, sorted into 3 piles. One is pure fan mail wanting autographs, the next is pure hate mail, and the last pile is one for legitimate asks for help. Lois knows that Clark can sort through these in a minute, but Clark is still impressed at all of these letters to him. Lois tells him to take a look closer, and he learns that the letters are actually all for Lois. And this is just her piles, since Clark's are still being trucked into an even bigger warehouse. Later, Clark goes to see Jimmy at the Daily Planet. Jimmy is busy working away on a story for Perry, not even bothering to look at Clark, who asks if they are okay, but Jimmy merely says that they are. Clark is uncomfortable since he doesn't feel that they are good and feels bad he never told Jimmy about his secret. Jimmy, however, says that he knew already, intriguing Clark since he got one over on most of the world's greatest investigative journalists. Jimmy turns and says that while he thought there were only 2 people on Earth that ever called him Jim, he soon realized that those 2 people were actually the one and the same. Clark laughs knowing that they are good, and Jimmy gets back to his story as Clark awkwardly stands waiting. Jimmy reaffirms that they are all good, so Clark leaves. However, Jimmy soon finishes his story, racing out after Clark and wondering if he was headed home. Clark says he is, so Jimmy asks if he can catch a ride. So Superman and his pal Jimmy Olsen take off into the sky. Sometime later at the Fortress of Solitude, Lois and Clark open the box Lex gave Lois, finding it contain proof that Marisol Leone is the leader of the Invisible Mafia. Lois knows that once her second and third source confirm that this is indeed legitimate, they need to do something with it. Clark says that she owns the Daily Planet now, but Lois knows that thanks to her huge donations to Star Labs and how they've been acting lately, who knows that if she's even from Earth. She knows Lex gave her the info since they would need to publish the story and get rid of his newest competitor, but Clark knows in doing so it would also bury the Daily Planet for good. Making a hard choice, Clark knows that they need to tell the truth, but Lois knows that this is going to ruin their lives and the lives of everyone they love. Superman Heroes issue 1 was a fantastic issue that displayed fully all of the talent currently working on Superman and Superman family related books, all set around Superman revealing his identity. This is the sort of stuff that is making this reveal, which has been done to death in comics, interesting. Seeing how the world and certain characters are reacting to this event is fantastic, and it's even pushing forward plots like Lex gift to Lois and revealing the heroes who is indeed behind the Invisible Mafia. My favorite pieces were from Greg Rucka and his Batman Wonder Woman story. It was great seeing Bruce kind of caught off guard with this reveal and not to have a proper response to it, and his proper response was basically just to be a little jealous of what Clark has. I think that's great and adds a little bit of a faucet to his character and their relationship. I really enjoyed this one shot, and I'm looking forward to the villains one shot next and how the Man of Steel's greatest villains react to this news. I'm going to give this issue a 9.5 out of 10.